Thank you, Rachel. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Veterans Day. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Today, we're going to be starting out just do a very quick overview, set the stage on veterans. Then we're going to have Tanya Ang from Veterans Education Success talk about tools to help veterans, followed by Jared Shank from the Ohio Department of Higher Ed, sharing their work in Ohio, and then we'll open up to questions, answer, and close. So, pretty straightforward today. Um, just giving a snapshot about veterans. There are a lot of veterans. There are over 20 million veterans in the US, uh, and approximately 11 million are considered of working age, under 64 or under 65. And then about 200,000 veterans leave active duty service annually. So this is an ongoing piece. Why this is relevant to us, and I'm sure that everybody on this call knows that when people leave the military, they are highly trained and highly skilled individuals. The military is a very large and complex organization that values training significantly, and there is a huge range of jobs. And so a lot of times people come out with skills that are exceptionally relevant to the workplace. They may or may not have leveraged those skills when they started working, but there's an opportunity, and if we're talking about the Reskilling and Recovery Network, thinking about ways that we do that. And I know both Tanya and Jared are going to talk about some tools. The other part that is important to pay attention to, they have educational benefits. And since 2009, when the post 9/11 GI Bill was passed, about 780,000 have accessed. There's a range of benefits that are available. The challenge is they're not necessarily the easiest to access. And this is an important part of the story. So, with that, I am going to turn it over to Tanya, who is going to take it from here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tanya Ng. I am Vice President at Veterans Education Success. I have worked in higher education for over 20 years and started my tenure in higher education as an associate registrar, where I was a school certifying official for service members and veterans using their GI Bill benefits. I also, I've worked at a small nonprofit in Southern California. I worked at the largest state, Cal State School in California, moved over to the American Council on Education, where I was able to participate in the evaluation of military training and credit recommendations for service members and veterans, and then have worked at the American Association of State Colleges and Universities in the Service Members Opportunity College, and now I'm at Veterans Education Success. I share all of that because I think it's relevant to a lot of our conversation we're having today, specifically related to reskilling veterans when they're getting ready to transition from military service into the civilian workforce. Veterans Education Success is a nonprofit organization who works to ensure service members, veterans, and their families have access to high quality education and a strong return on investment for their hard earned education benefits. We provide casework, we do policy and advocacy on the Hill, and we work to find ways to empower access to high quality education by working directly with colleges and universities, as well as state entities and the military and VA, all of the above. So for me, this is a passion. So if I get really worked up, like, please know it's because this is something that's very much important to me and something that I get very excited for. As Brett talked about earlier, we have a large number of service members and veterans. And when I talk about service members and veterans, I'm including those who have served as reservists, those who have served in the National Guard, and then active duty, as well as then those who have transitioned out of the military. What we have found is service members and veterans do just as well, if not better, than their peers within higher education. Research has shown that time and time again. Additionally, what research has shown was right after World War II, when the first post 9/11 GI or first GI Bill was begun, Congress went back and did an evaluation of what that looked like related to return on investment. And what they found was for every dollar that was spent on the GI Bill benefits, $7 was returned back into the economy. And to me, that says a lot, because that tells me that if we can get service members and veterans access to high quality education and training, they are going to provide that return on investment for the larger American economy. Additionally, they want to be working. You talk to a lot of service members and veterans who you say, why did you serve? What caused you to join? First of all, it's usually the dedication to service to their country. But second of all, it's to enhance the economic mobility of themselves and their families. And the benefits that are offered to them through TA, tuition assistance, while serving in active duty, as well as the GI Bill benefit, are driving forces for them to go to school and be able to get high quality education. We're looking now at a very unique place in our in America right now, especially when it relates to COVID and our recession. And there's conversations throughout, and you have all had them, as far as what role does higher ed play in helping reskill people who've now found themselves unemployed. And for me, my focus obviously is related to service members and veterans. And this conversation started well before COVID and well before our recession, but I think that now is a very great opportunity for colleges and universities, and in particular today, conversation around community colleges, stepping up and playing a larger role in supporting the reskilling of service members and veterans as they're getting ready to transition into the civilian workforce, or were in the civilian workforce and are now looking for other opportunities to bide their time, so to speak, until they can get back into the workforce and gain the skills necessary to be retrained. There are a lot of ways in which community colleges have been able to support service members and veterans, and I'll highlight a few of them when I'm through with some of the background information on this. But what you can see is if you look up Georgetown, CEW, my brain is just not thinking clearly today, but they actually did research and found that there is an overlooked value of certificates and associate's degrees for students in general. And some of the areas that provide the largest return on investment for students going to colleges to get their certificate or to get an AA degree are related to issues such as STEM. So engineering and technology, there's also mechanics, there's and repair, there's law enforcement, there's healthcare, and there's business management. And each of these top areas for service that are being able to be offered by community colleges are areas where service members and veterans excel. They've already received significant training in those areas. They've had a significant amount of experience in those areas, and to be able to get them and train them it will really provide they'll be able to take that and move into their next career. Community colleges, additionally, why community college? Community colleges, when in research that we've done, is on average 4 times less expensive than trade schools, and their credits are more likely to transfer to a 4-year college. And so when I'm talking with members on the Hill, when I'm talking with employers, there's this conversation around, we just need to get them employed. And yes, we do need to get them employed. But what you'll see is a lot of times service members and veterans will get some sort of training, get employed, and then want to go back and finish out their, thank you, Brett, for posting that link. They want to go back and they want to finish out their bachelor's degree. As someone who's worked with the adult student population since I started within higher education, I've seen a significant number who started getting their 2-year, went back to work, came back and said, you know what, we need to finish our 4-year, got their 4-year, and then went and graduated with their master's. I remember a man who was almost 80 years old walking across my stage with his diploma. And so finding ways to get to kind of bridge that gap and create what has often been referred to as stackable credentials is really important, and why community colleges play such a huge role in this process. As we've also talked about, they're significantly less expensive, and again, provide a stronger return on investment, typically for the training that's offered to those who have served our country. So there's this base, like this foundation that we've said of, student veterans do well in school. They're very motivated to get back into the workforce and get the training necessary to excel. They come with significant training and experience. And we found that in the past that any kind of, when we put money into them, we received a $7 return on investment per dollar. And that was before inflation. And so we want to look at then, what can community colleges do to better engage with service members and veterans, and how can we shorten time to completion and take advantage of what's already been the foundation that's already been set for them. And so you look then at like some of the things that are available through the Department of Defense. And so the first thing that many of you have heard of is the JST, the Joint Services Transcript. For those who haven't heard of it, what that is it's a transcript that takes all of the training and experience that service members have had throughout their military career, and it's an evaluation of that training with college credit recommendations added onto it. So when I was at ACE, the American Council on Education, we would go onto military bases. We would get access to the training, to the curriculum, to what the assessments looked like, and looking at some of the work that they would do. We would do an entire comprehensive evaluation. This evaluation included bringing in those who were actively teaching in those fields from accredited universities throughout the country, to be able to look at that coursework, to look at their experience, and then be able to make college credit recommendations based on what they're seeing is throughout, trends throughout the country. And so this is a great way for community colleges to look at this JST and then find ways to fill in the gaps to help lead to credentials or training. And again, I'll touch on some of the examples that you've seen, like within healthcare, within like HVAC, like different things like that. There are ways that schools have been able to do that, but what they've done is shorten their time to completion by going through that process. And I'm talking fast and I'm doing broad overviews because 15 minutes is not a lot of time to be able to deeper dive into these things, but I think it will hopefully provide a broad overview for you. Finally, if you look at what the military is doing outside of just the DoD, the JST, the Joint Services Transcript, there's the Skill Bridge program. And a lot of people haven't ever heard of the Skill Bridge program, but what that does is it provides the last 6 months of a service member's time in service for them to be able to go and get reskilled in an area that will allow them to then transition out of the military and directly into some form of employment. And the Skill Bridge program is very much focused on credentialing and licensing. It's focused on getting hands-on experience. It's focused on 2-year degrees, all of those types of things. And so if there's like one area where I would say community colleges could really like embrace and work with DoD on these types of things, it's to work with them on these Skill Bridge programs. And so if you look back at where we're seeing the department, like where we're seeing service members and veterans really thriving and excelling in their training that they receive, again, engineering, technology, mechanics, law enforcement, healthcare, all of these things are areas that are ripe for credentialing, that there's been a lot of focus on credentialing, and community colleges are the ones that are able to address these issues in ways that no other school, I believe, can. And so there's that need. We need you guys to get involved in that process. I'll touch on really fast some of the examples of ways I've seen community colleges partner with the military, partner with industry, and partner with four-year schools to create like kind of this pathway from service into training into directly into a career. One of them was Lansing Community College in Michigan had worked with their government. They had worked very closely with their Michigan, like the government within Michigan, and then had worked very closely with other states surrounding them to evaluate what kinds of trainings were happening within the healthcare industry for service members while they were serving, and then find where those gaps were and provide training specifically for those gaps. So instead of a service member, or instead of a transitioning service member or even a veteran having to retake every single health class and that they would normally need to take if they had not had that experience, what Lansing did was kind of say, okay, you know what, they had within this course, within EMT course, 2 of these credits were already met based on the training that they received within the military. But there's this one area that requires training that they probably wouldn't have received in order for them to receive a civilian credential. And so what they would do is then teach that 1 credit, and then the service member would move on to the next course, or the veteran. They then from there were able to partner with and by the time they were done, they would have their EMT certificate. And so, but instead of just stopping there, what they did is partner with local four-year schools, four-year state schools, to say, okay, this is the 2-year degree that they're going to finish. And so how can we then help them transition into getting their PA or, doing their pre-med training? And so what they did is they created pathways from transition all the way through to that degree that will get them employed while they're trying to finish the next piece of the puzzle, or be able to just get them certified and get them out there working. So those things I think are really was like something that a lot of schools had not heard of or done earlier on, and they started this was like 7 or 8 years ago when I was at ACE. Then there's Coach Ice Community College, which is in Arizona. And what they've done is they've partnered with Fort Huachuca to start getting service members, active duty service members, actual regionally accredited courses through their military training. And so what they did is they reached out to the local base and they created an MOU where those who were teaching some of the leadership courses and some of the other courses at Fort Huachuca to get their service members through those initial trainings, what they were able to do is say, hey, we want to work with you to hire whoever it is that's teaching this course with another professor, so that we can then make sure that when the service member is done taking these courses, they're going to have a transcript that will be able to transfer to other colleges and universities, or allow them employment as soon as they transition out of the service. And so that was another example. And then another one that I've seen is within Chicago, Terrell Owens, who's now at the University of Chicago, had started a program related to plumbing. And he was able to partner with the community college, the union, and then his state to create a pathway from what service members might have had while serving, like to take that prior learning and then create a pathway for them to get trained as a plumber and then be employed. And as many of you guys know, if you're looking at an automotive, like you're trying to get your mechanic's license, or if you're getting plumbing or HVAC, these positions can pay, in the high double digits, mid 60s and above. And so they're not, these programs provide a strong return on investment and help them make significant more money even than they would as with a high school diploma, with it being less expensive than had they gone to a 4-year technical school. And for these students, this is a really good option. So I threw a lot at you, and I'm hoping that you all, I've provided my information here, my email address, so that if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. And then additionally, I've provided a link to the AC credit recommendations overview so that anyone can go and look and kind of dive through some of their research so that they can have a better idea of what a recommendation, like what the evaluation process looks like and the rigor behind it as you're looking at ways to to create programs for service members and veterans.
Thank you, Tanya. I'm going to proceed now to Jared.
I guess it would help if I unmute myself. So I'm Jared Shank, Senior Director for Military and Apprenticeship Initiatives and Special Projects with the Ohio Department of Higher Education. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. So I'm going to hit a lot of stuff in a very short period of time. So take notes on what questions you want to ask, and I'll have my email and contact information at the end of this as well. So some of the items I'm going to go over are House Bill 488, which is Ohio-specific legislation regarding everything military and higher ed. What we in Ohio call military transfer assurance guides, what we're doing with other military credit, some apprenticeship opportunities, some of the relationships we have, and how our strategy is set up and determined here in Ohio. Next slide. So again, this could be a whole separate presentation, but this is what we call House Bill 488. We kind of commonly refer to it as the Ohio Values Veterans Initiative. This is based on legislation signed in Ohio, and some of the major points of that legislation are these bullet points. The first one was pretty much in existence, but we wanted to solidify it, is that the colleges had to have a ability to have a student veteran organization on their campus, essentially. The next one is that the alumni and career services entities on campus had to be able to essentially have or host some type of a military, basically help translate military language into like a resume or business type language for service members and veterans. The Board of Trustees has to determine at some type of an interval how often they want to survey the veteran military population on their campus to determine what their needs are. Another big one is required priority registration for all veterans. This not only was a big deal for the GI Bill using folks, but this also, an added bonus of this was a dramatic change in tracking amongst students. So not only were we able to track the GI Bill users, but then people who were not using any type of federal benefits or military related benefits came out of the woodwork to identify themselves so that they could have priority registration. In here was also the bullet point there for no fee for the evaluation, transcription, application of military credit. So any type of military credit that's evaluated, there's no charge for doing that, no charge for putting it on the transcript. The big one that's still forever ongoing and the largest part of my job is the next one, is the ensure appropriate credit is awarded, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. Each of our public institutions had to adopt some type of a policy of support for service members and veterans, so they had to actually state what it is they wanted to do to help service members and veterans on their campus. And then lastly, another big one is each campus had to designate a single point of contact to help with this legislation and all military issues on their campus. That single point of contact group has actually formed a statewide entity. So many of you probably have a statewide registrar group, like there's the national registrar group. We have one in Ohio called OACRO, which is the Ohio registrars. We now have this, they call themselves the Ohio Veterans Education Council. So it's the points of contact from all the schools. And I typically attend their meetings and kind of the fly on the wall, just hearing what's going on around the state. Next slide. So what is an MTAG, Military Transfer Assurance Guide? In Ohio, for a really quick rundown of how transfer credit works, we do not have a common numbering system in the state, but behind the scenes, we have what we call an Ohio articulation number that we assign. And essentially, long story short, with general education courses, major courses, career tech courses, there's faculty members out there that establish learning outcomes for those courses. All the schools submit their courses to kind of match those articulation numbers. And if the faculty determine that it's a match, then effectively that course transfers. It doesn't have to be evaluated. It moves around the system just like it would in a common numbering system. So when we started this military process, we're taking the military courses, we're treating it just like it's another Ohio institution. Those same faculty members look at the military coursework, they evaluate it, and they make those equivalencies out there. So currently in Ohio, with direct course equivalencies, we're actually approaching about 170, but over 160 military courses that are evaluated to transfer directly into Ohio without evaluations. Obviously, the institutions are still responsible to evaluate anything that's not an MTAG course. Information can be found at the link that's posted there on the website, and most importantly, with the whole transfer credit process, this is all faculty owned. So with those gen ed courses, the entry level major courses, the career tech courses, we actually work with over 1,000 faculty members that are out there evaluating and looking at these courses. And that's from all of the Ohio institutions. And then the military is put into that. So we didn't want to create an entirely new process that we would have to kind of sell and establish faculty buy-in. We wanted to use what we already had, what was already kind of approved and looked at very favorably. So that's how we transfer some of those MTAGs around. Next slide. So for a direct example, I often highlight the one that's in yellow. This is an Army course, Integrated Family Test Equipment Operator. You can see that has a military course. When that transfers into Ohio, the Ohio articulation numbers are on the far right column. They receive credit for DC circuits, digital course, microprocessors, and electronics. What that means in normal folks' language is this is typically an electrical engineering technology type program. So that you can see that that's essentially a semester or slightly more than a semester of credit in the engineering technology program. This is not electives. This is hard meat and potatoes of your course. So that is a semester of credit that's awarded just for that training program. And again, that does not have to be evaluated when it comes into the state. It's already set in stone. Knock on wood, the registrars and appropriate people should have that coded. So when the JST shows up with that course, they get awarded that credit pretty much instantaneously on their transcript. Next slide. So this is a big area we could talk about a lot, but I kind of call it this MTAG and other credits. So we have all these various statewide courses, but obviously the military teaches a whole lot of stuff outside of what we normally teach in higher ed, some of which is taught in higher ed, some of which is not. So we did a lot of statewide training sessions with faculty and staff to figure out how do you evaluate military credit? How do you understand ACE recommendations? How do you understand Community College of the Air Force courses and everything being taught out there? We have a lot of training posted on the website that's there. And again, the whole point of this was to really empower the institutions to evaluate this credit on their own and not make them afraid to look at this and not understand it, essentially. Next slide. Okay. So several big things I could mention here, but the biggest one I'll mention is General Education Military Credit Project. That same link pretty much takes you to a page. There's also a lot of information about nursing, what we've done with that in the state. These could all be their own presentations. And in fact, I'm doing presentations for National Institute for the Study of Transfer students early next year on each of these. So if you want to hear more, you can attend those. But the General Education Military Credit Project came about because we were trying to figure out a way to broadly award credit for a lot of service members at the same time, because you're always trying to kind of maximize the bang for your buck. One of the things we noticed is the overwhelming majority of our institutions had some type of a diversity, multiculturalism type requirement for their general education programs. We also knew that the majority of service members who deployed overseas, or even if they were stationed at a overseas base, received some type of a pre-deployment training, let alone their actual deployment training and deployment experiences. And how did we want to, try to award credit for that? So there's a whole lot of information in that little link that says click here. Basically dug through, did a whole bunch of research on types of documents, the types of training that the military does for cultural awareness training before they deploy overseas, and all of that information out there. We cited some examples of how some Ohio institutions were doing this, both public and private. We cited, I know, at least one out-of-state institution that was doing this. I think it was New Mexico State University. To basically highlight how credit could be awarded for this. And we didn't, unlike the statewide guarantee where it has to be done a specific way, we knew that all colleges, their requirements for diversity and multiculturalism were different. So we basically got a policy of support from all of our chief academic officers to essentially say, you need to be looking at this and figure out your own internal system to award this credit, meaning some school might do this via more of a paperwork type process. Some schools might do it more like a prior learning assessment portfolio evaluation, but in some way, shape, or form, they're trying to figure out how to award this credit. And again, this is applicable for essentially anybody who's deployed overseas. And at this point in time, it's still a pretty sizable population, although in the future that'll probably decrease as the conflicts wind down, but it's definitely very applicable credit. Again, that's gen ed, so it would be applied to, any and every degree out there. Next slide. So this is another portion of my work, involves a lot of apprenticeship training, and it's interesting when the world of apprenticeship and military can combine together. So something that's been going on, certainly in Ohio, and I imagine some of the other states here on the call, is a lot of community colleges are becoming registered sponsor sites for a lot of apprenticeship programs. There's been a lot of federal grant money out there to do things of this nature and to expand apprenticeships. That's going, very well, and that's a whole different body of students to tap. An opportunity for service members that exists out there is the United Services Military Apprenticeship Program called USMAP. The link takes you to their page. Essentially, it's a way that a service member can log into that system. They can look at their job occupation. So let's just say they do something, electrical related in the service. It'll list all of the various apprenticeship programs that involve some type of an electrical type background in it, and they can select what one they're interested in. And similar to the Skill Bridge type program, they're typically doing this in probably the last year or two of their service contract. And basically what they're doing is they're actually participating in that apprenticeship program and the on-the-job training, and their chain of command is basically signing off on that. If they complete that training, they actually get the recognized Department of Labor certificate of completion, and they can be an apprentice when they come back to wherever it is they go. The bigger question is, if they don't complete that DOL certificate, what happens? At least in Ohio and in most of the world of apprentices, we call that a credit voucher process. So in the world of higher ed, it's typically transfer credit. You send in your transcript, you get it evaluated. In the world of apprentices, it's called a transfer voucher. You do the same thing. You essentially send in your background, your training that you have, and they tell you where you will place and how many hours you get awarded for what training you've done for that apprenticeship opportunity. So that's another avenue that they can get credit. And in a perfect storm opportunity with, some cases where a student could do this, and say the other training that we had the MTAG course for, you could actually start working pretty significantly on a degree program and an apprenticeship program basically at the same time. And you could choose kind of which direction you want to go, one or the other, or do both as you, go through that process. So it's a pretty good opportunity that's out there. Next slide. Relationships, this is not all of them, but I wanted to highlight that my role at our office at the Department of Higher Ed, I talk regularly with pretty much somebody, at least one person, veteran type liaison at all of the entities listed on here. So Jobs and Family Services, Veterans Affairs, within Ohio, Apprentice Ohio, our Adjutant General, the National Guard. I sit on a board for the Military Interstate Children's Commission Compact, which is a K-12 initiative for military children. The Multi-State Collaborative on Military Credit, that's 13 states in the Midwest that are all sharing information about how we evaluate military credit. Lots of relationships. A couple I didn't mention specifically on here, which also might be of interest, are relationships that we've started to form with entities, military entities themselves, like the Community College of the Air Force. They have a general education mobile program that allows your institution to teach gen ed courses for the Air Force. They have a Air University Associate to Baccalaureate Cooperative Program, which is basically a 2+2 agreement you can sign on to with the Community College of the Air Force. So if you're a 4-year institution, or even in Ohio's case, some of our 2-year institutions that offer an applied baccalaureate degree, you can actually enter into 2+2 agreements with the Air Force. The Medical Education and Training Campus down at Fort Sam Houston, same thing. You can enter into almost any articulation agreement with any of the military's medical fields in that program. There's all kinds of, I think they have like over 46, 48 programs, something like that down there, different medical programs they offer, as well as also the new Naval Community College that just partnered with at least a few Ohio institutions, but numerous institutions around the whole United States as a whole too. So those are some of the military relationships. Next slide. So structure strategy. Obviously, a big one I would say for those who are interested is obviously my position. The importance of having somebody at a higher education or entity that oversees all of this, I think, is incredibly valuable. I can dedicate my time to this, and most of the time I am not enough. As one person, I would love to have a small team of minions that could help me with everything, but we at least have this, and a lot of people this entity, or it's certainly not a dedicated position. Also, when we implemented our legislation we had in Ohio, the Chancellor of the Department of Higher Ed created what we call the Military Strategic Implementation Team to help implement that law across all of our institutions. However, after that was implemented and done, we've kept that group alive, and we basically use them now as a soundboard and kind of a planning group. So it's made up of people who are directors of veteran centers on campus. We have registrar type individuals, financial aid individuals, faculty, administration, um, a provost type individual. So all of these folks that come together, and basically we just have a meeting to talk about what is the next thing we want to tackle, what issues are we having, where do we want to keep moving forward at, and that's what that group is. And it's a very good group to have that discussion and move forward. Next slide, Brett. So I have my contact information on here. Feel free to reach out, email, call, whenever. I field a lot of questions from a lot of different states quite a bit, so it's nothing new. I did get a question in the chat on what we're doing for Flexible for Veterans in response to the pandemic. That one's kind of tough. I don't know if I know of too much that is very specific to veterans. It's so much that we're doing for all students, and typically it's all different types of obviously online training, but they're having, all of our veteran centers out there have been essentially switched to the ability to have obviously online meetings, Zoom meetings, to go over benefits and discussions and things like that. That was not that utilized beforehand, but I know it's heavily utilized now, obviously. I'm not sure I know again of anything else very specific. It's just everything is pretty much switched to some type of an online format, online mechanism to help service members and veterans. They've adhered to anything that the VA has come down with to help with changes and sustaining GI Bill payments during some of this time and all of that. I feel like everything is, knock on wood, somewhat under control now versus March and April, where it was really up in the air and we didn't know if they were all going to be dropping out of programs or what was going on. I feel like that's sort of balanced out at this point, so I'm not really hearing any dramatic issues at the moment. Got another question. You mentioned a Naval Community College. Yes, the Navy. And
Jared, can
sorry?
I jump in really fast?
Yep.
As far as the question that's specific to service members and veterans with COVID, I think that that what's already being done for the larger post-traditional student population is going to be the same thing that would be done for service members and veterans. And a lot of times colleges and universities, when I speak with them, they're worried about the fact like, well, we need to do all these different things for our service members and veterans. But the fact of the matter is that the same issues, or most of the issues that service members and veterans are facing, are the same ones that post-traditional students are facing. And so just making sure that information is provided to veterans is really important. Just letting them know, hey, these resources are available for you. Make sure to take advantage of them. It goes a long way. Sorry, I didn't want to.
No, you're fine. That's exactly right. And we got a question of how do we let people know about this? That is a $1 million question out there. I would say we kind of try everything under the sun. So there's a little bit of social media. We've tried to let all of our veteran centers at our institutions know, and probably that's probably the best entity, because that's typically where the veterans and service members show up first on a campus, is at our the veteran centers. Now, that being said, I would love for us to have an actual, advertising budget where we could say this is what we're doing and this is great, grand, and marvelous. But that's not always how the world works. So we have to rely on our individual institutions to kind of do that as well, to talk about what we're doing in the state. At one point in time, we did bring all the institutions together, and I think we did some national ads. We all kind of co-chipped in and paid money. That was put out there in some military publications for the public institutions in the state. But we're open to everything, and we broadcast everything out there as much as we can. Somebody asked.
Also, sorry, I'm sorry. I just want to add to that too. A lot of times, the best way to get information out to other service members and veterans is by word of mouth. That's where you're going to see the most trust being built. And so, if they're seeing a lot of advertisements is one thing, but actually having those that have participated in the program come back and say, hey, guess what? Like, I experienced this and this was a really cool thing. You should look at it too. That's where you're going to see the most uptake, so to speak, of veterans that are interested in those programs and wanting to engage.
Yep. And there was a question about the Naval Community College. So I'll say probably about as much as I know at the moment is the Navy is standing up a Naval Community College, similar to the Community College of the Air Force. The intent at the moment is to become a regionally accredited institution that teaches Navy courses. However, in order to get there, they know they kind of have to have a stepping stone. So they're basically put out a call for institutions earlier this year who could partner with them to teach programs that the Navy needs. So they sent out a request. A lot of schools, send in their applications, and then they sent out letters saying who they selected for that. So for a couple of years here, I don't know what it is, probably 3 to 5 years is my guess, is there's really going to be a full-time direct partnership between the Navy and various institutions out there across the country to teach these courses. The Navy pays the schools directly for that training. The eventual process is that the Navy will start having some of that in-house. They'll stand up their own faculty and do this, but they have to get there first. So it's kind of this process. So that's being done out there on the naval side of that. And a couple people, looks like they mentioned the links for the Air Force programs I mentioned out there, the General Education Mobile and the AU ABC, which is the 2+2.
Tanya, do you have anything to add? You looked like you were going to add something, Tanya.
No, everything. Yeah, I totally. I did see a question about the military friendly status, and I would caution against that.
Yeah, I'd say the exact same thing. So go ahead, go first.
Yeah, I think that a lot of these military friendly status, I don't even know how to call them, but groups that are doing this don't tend to really highlight. They don't have strong enough metrics to use to really decide what is considered military friendly, and I think your better option is to really highlight, like on the front of your website, like, hey, we support veterans, and partnering with your local bases, or going to your local Legion and VFW posts, going and grabbing a beer with them. That's how you're going to start to build those relationships, and the relationships are where you're going to see the most, again, trust being built. They're not going to feel like they're a dollar sign where you're just kind of going after them with all this advertising and, oh, look at us, we have military friendly. It's actually the relationships and the building of trust that's going to be your best option.
Yeah, and I would essentially second that. In Ohio, we still have some schools that are participating in that, but numerous of our institutions no longer do it. One of the big ones out there, I don't know whether to use names or not, but Victory Media has largely become pay to play. If you pay them extra money for their advertising, you will get ranked higher on their military friendly scale. I.e., some of the institutions out there that are military friendly, a couple of them, especially Ivy Leagues, one of them that was ranked military friendly, I think had literally one military student enrolled using the GI Bill at their institution. In Ohio, it is being worked on, but our institutions, that Veterans Education Council group I mentioned, that's the single points of contact, have actually written up criteria that they deem to be what they would call military friendly. They're working on what they actually want to officially cite it for, or our Ohio institutions to follow, so that we have kind of this guidelines that are out there to say this is what you really need to have, because the national rankings for it are pretty horrible, and I would generally avoid it. It's typically just a money grab. And I'll be frank too. I mean, I'm an Army vet myself. I never once looked at any military friendly rankings out there. I have yet to ever hear any student that we've ever talked to interview say that they looked at a military friendly ranking from any of those national sources. It is largely still word of mouth and family and friends who attended a school and had a positive relationship or interaction.
Jared, I want to follow up too, in that we provide casework for students who have been impacted by more predatory type institutions. And those are the students that we hear who found their institution through those rankings. And they are the ones that are now, we've have over 5,000 students in our database who have been impacted. And so they are the ones that are actually telling their peers not to look at those rankings because of that very issue.
Something Amanda had asked about how to build strong relationships with military and local installation guard leaders. One of those obviously is just communications. Open a communications channel to them, email whoever you can find, call whoever you can find, and just chat with them. I know in Ohio, we've built a little bit stronger relationship with our reserve and active duty recruiters even. And some of this involves the direct looking at skills, in that they started seeing what we were doing with military credit, the MTAG process, and the reserves. For those of you who don't know, it's kind of like the National Guard. You do your training and you come back to your state. they were able to say, these are our in-demand occupations we have for the Army that we need people in. And then we could actually kind of look at that and say, well, of those, X number of those are also in-demand occupations for Ohio that we need in Ohio. And by the way, of those, there's a handful that are MTAG related. Can we work on this together type of thing? And they've started doing that with what they call the CONAP program, which is the Concurrent Admissions Program, which basically when a service member signs up, they would say, I'm interested in going to higher ed. They list a few schools. And in the past, that was it. It was basically the school would send them a letter and say, hello, this is institution X. Whenever you're ready to come here, we would love to have you. But now because of the MTAGs, they can actually send that out, same letter, and say, hey, we're institution X. We know that you're doing this training in the military. When you come back, you're going to have a semester of credit waiting for you if you transfer here to us, and you'll be, this far along on your program. And we're working on pathways too across the board. They can show that as well. There's a lot of good ways to highlight, what they're doing.
Also connecting with your National Guard. If you're part of a state entity already, like it's easier to connect with another state entity. And so National Guard is a great way to be able to connect with the local bases. And there are challenges. I mean, I'll be frank, and many of you have probably experienced this with building out, like being able to connect with local bases, getting on there, and it's because they're inundated with so many people wanting to partner with them and connect with them. And so don't give up, be persistent, and find ways to build out relationships with them in other ways. So maybe you have a service day project, maybe you start with your National Guard and then kind of expand to show what you're already doing with the National Guard. Slowly and surely, like you will build that out, but persistence is key.
Yep. And there was a question about racial inequity issues with service members, GI Bill, and all of that. I would say I don't have a solution yet for that. We just in the last couple of years have really gotten our higher education information system, our database for all of our data, really built up to a point where we can finally track all of that for the service members and veterans across. So it's been very hard over the course of years to really have good data, and we're just starting to get that and try to figure out what we can do and look at all that. So we don't really have a firm answer yet. We're also doing a project with our National Guard Scholarship Program, a Pay for Success project that's in its infancy. But one of the things we are going to be looking at is the racial inequity issues within that of our National Guard members as well. So I don't have anything firmly yet, but that's something that hopefully in a year or two we'll have some data and some information that we can share about that.
We actually just hired someone who is come on board to help us address those issues within higher education specific for service members and veterans. And he's been doing a lot of research on those issues. Like Jared, we don't have a lot of answers just yet, but we have made it a priority within Veterans Education Success to address those at a higher level. We're also starting a new arm of Veterans Education Success, which I will be overseeing, called Elevate Vets. And what that's going to be is specifically for colleges and universities to come. It's a portal where we'll have some training on like how do you support veterans from A to Z, but we'll also have like a back end place where we'll have working groups. And one of the working groups that we're going to be having is one focused on equity within the GI Bill usage and TA and all of those pieces. And we're hoping to have these working groups come out with white papers and trainings and webinars and different things like that to kind of help increase those conversations.
And we also have a great comment from Dr. Ledbetter about transitioning service members are eligible for dislocated worker funding and don't necessarily need to use their GI Bill benefits. I'd love to actually open it up to other folks on the floor because I know there is a wealth of knowledge and experience on this call. Does anybody have examples or thoughts from their own experiences working with service members and veterans that they'd like to share?
Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Ledbetter. If you don't mind, I'd like to chime in.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Of course, many of you may already know I serve as the commissioner of the Alaska Department of Labor and Workforce Development. And I cannot stress enough how important it is for all of you to add the Department of Labor overall, to your list of services and opportunities that you can help veterans to connect to. I am a veteran myself, Air Force veteran. I served during Iraqi freedom. I have a husband who I've been married to for 24 years, who served in the Marine Corps. My two sons, ages 22 and 20, are currently serving on active duty in the United States Marine Corps. I've got a 15-year-old daughter. She's not ready to enlist yet, but we're working on her. And so I'm saying all of that to say our family is committed to service. We are veterans, and we believe in connecting veterans to services. And so my experience separating from the Air Force, had I not had contact with a vet rep from the Department of Labor and Workforce Development, I probably would not be serving in the top spot of the department. So I cannot tell you how important it is to know the resources in the area that you all are in. And you are right, there are predatory training providers who go after veterans because they know that GI Bill is available. But there are other sources of funding for veterans. Dislocated worker is one of them. Those individuals who are transitioning from military service, they are probably, some of them, many of them are not retiring. And so there is funding available for them. And there's also an opportunity for them to, through the department, to have some career advisement and assessment going on, so people are not being predators with our veterans and just having them go into high dollar programs that they're not going to really benefit from. So again, thank you all for being on this Zoom meeting today. Thank you for your services to veterans. And we just appreciate what you're doing. And I think the collaboration is good. And the more we know, the more we can help veterans.
I actually just recently, I think that's such an important point. And I recently was working with a student who was going to drop out of community college because she felt like she didn't have enough money to pay for childcare while she went to school. It was going to be an extra couple $1,000s, and she just didn't have it. And she had called her school originally to get, like, are there any resources out there and available? And the school had told her no. Well, they sent her to the wrong place and said that was the only resource that was available, but that was related to employment, not like child care, for like employment, not for education. And so she was denied, obviously. But I did a quick research and found that they're on their website that there was actually a different program available through the state for childcare that provided grants and scholarships. And so it is really important for those who are supporting the student population to be aware of what resources are indeed available and how to get them access to those resources.
Excellent. All really critical, important examples. Any other state examples? All right. Well, recognizing that we're close to time, really want to thank everybody for the wonderful comments, questions, and Jared and Tanya for the great presentation. And then lastly, on this day, again, thanks to all the veterans for their service and being mindful of what they give. So with that, we'll all give you all 5 minutes back. So
hey, Brett.
Yeah.
Paul Weckman here. I wanted to wait to the end. I'm sorry.
Yeah, jump on it.
Did 26 years active duty, retired, and then now I work for Sanford Health. It's the largest healthcare system in the Midwest. We approximately have over 50,000 employees. And challenges, like many healthcare industries, is trying to get enough healthcare providers even at the entry level, nurse practitioners, LPNs, et cetera. So this is my question, I guess, to the group. I've experienced, personally, a Marine that stepped on a IED and blew off both of his legs. The corpsman there who applied those tourniquets took care of his head wounds, started an IV. He was medvaced and he was saved. Now you take that corpsman, who already we know are going to get accredited for all his military training, but I want to know what are we doing about giving credit for those competencies, those experiences that are maybe not in a classroom, but actually in the field? When I grew up, and I'm dating myself, many, many years ago, I clept out my first year of college because what I learned in high school, I just get rid of my math and my, English, all that was clept. Are we going to think about doing something like this where you have a medical corpsman or an army medic who's got that field experience that can, do minor surgery and save lives? Why are we forcing them to start, if they want to come back, to become an LPN or a nurse, all the way back to like that first year when they hopefully maybe we can measure them through their experience with competencies, aptitude tests, or CLEP out, so we can more fast track them and get them back into the workforce? Thank you.
Brett, can I chime in on that one?
Please do.
So on our webpage, we do have a large report we did with what we called like a nursing project. So we did sort of exactly what you were just mentioning, where we looked at the medic training across the field. So medics in Ohio, especially the Air Force and Army, they basically get their EMT credit. There's essentially no questions asked with that. However, to go that next step further, we actually started having meetings with all of our nursing deans and the curriculum folks at our public institutions to figure out how to keep that moving forward and what to do. Now, we had two benefits of this, one being the legislation that required our institutions to award military credit. And then at the same time, our Board of Nursing created something that they called this advanced standing policy. And in the advanced standing policy, they basically told the state institutions, all the nursing programs in the state, that they had to figure out a mechanism to award some type of a prior service credit for anybody who has medical training. So that affected adults who were, paramedics and EMTs out there in the world that weren't veterans, as well as veterans. So they actually kind of, for two reasons, came together for our meetings and would talk about where they would fall in this curriculum, where they would go. And as we had those meetings, the Board of Nursing actually started creating some of their new internal policies in the state to recognize some of those folks for LPN. So at a certain level of training in the Air Force, if you hit the 5 level of being a medic, you can actually sit for the Ohio LPN license. Same thing with the LPNs in the Army. You can sit directly for the Ohio LPN license as well. So there's some mechanisms to get that done. And I know Tanya mentioned the program up at Lansing Community College that was done. That was a same kind of vein, same train of thought, as they wanted to figure out where to do that. And we had better resolve just getting those programs together and talking about where the student would fit in their program and how to place them versus trying to create an actual bridge course. The bridge course, when you first look at it, seems sexy, but then all of a sudden you start realizing there's probably not enough students that are going to be pulling in here to really offer this bridge course every term or every other term. They have created some bridge type coursework in Ohio, and there has been some conversations about, could we get at least a couple schools to offer this each term all around the state, so that if somebody needs it, they can go to one of those other places and do it. That's still being discussed right now. But there's been a lot of work with the medical stuff, I know, in Ohio, and I think Illinois did a large project on it as well in their state, just so you have some more background on that too.
Any additions, Tanya?
No, I think you hit them all. You do want to be careful of, you need to find what's going to work specific for your students. And that was the biggest challenge Lansing faced, was having enough students every term to be able to go through each of that coursework. And so it's finding what works. I think the final thing I would say is there's a lot of push. So I have known someone who was a medic in the military who didn't end up going into that work afterwards because of how much extra work they would have to take to relearn programs that they already knew. And so that has to be addressed. On the opposite end, if I go into a room of veterans and I ask a room of 20, 500, 100, I've asked them all, how many of you are doing what you did when you served in the military? I get maybe 1 or 2 who raise their hand, maybe. One time I had 5. And so I think then what we need to also be looking at is what are some of these soft skills that they offer, and then what are ways that we can translate some of their experience. So if someone did some computer programming within the military, what like what types of engineering programs are out there, what types of technical type of programs are out there, and then how can we translate those skills over.
Wonderful, thank you. One last super quick question to Tanya. What was the name of the Arizona Community College that you mentioned?
It was Cochise, COCHISE.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again to everyone for the great questions and great presentation. And I hope everybody has the great rest of your day and a wonderful Veterans Day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.